My name is Dr. Kate Grant. I'd like to welcome you to my art video for the Inspiring Norfolk Project and the Festival of Learning 2021. Have you ever wondered what people get up to when they're at hospital? Have you ever thought about what happens when you go to the GP? Well, I'm going to tell you about a portrait painting project which is all about what happens behind the scenes at the hospital. And in the last year, during the pandemic, I've been painting all of my friends at the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital and also the GP practices that I work at around Norfolk and Suffolk and Cambridgeshire. There are also some portraits of people in South Wales as well because they've been working very hard too. Now, if you think drawing a painting or a portrait is very difficult, I'm going to explain to you how you can go something as easy as Mr. Greedy to painting one of these. Now, I am a Norfolk girl. I grew up here. I went to Great Ellingham Primary School. I then went to Attleborough High School, which is now called Attleborough Academy. I also went to Wyndham College, and then I went off to medical school in Scotland. And when I came back, I have been working here as a GP, and I still work at the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital where I used to volunteer when I was 16 or 17. Now, the most important lesson that I learned from art was from Mrs. Wainwright when I was at Great Ellingham Primary when I was about 6 or 7, and she showed me how to trace, and I'm eternally grateful to her for this. So she taught us how to take a very simple picture, and this was actually my first ever picture that I traced. It's Mr. Greedy from the Mr. Men, and she showed us how to take some very, very ordinary grease-proof paper which you can find in your kitchen drawer, and she taught me how to put it over the top of Mr. Greedy, trace the shape around it, flip it over, and then put it onto a normal piece of paper and then colour it in. I've never forgotten how to do that lesson. People think tracing's cheating, but it isn't, and all the famous artists like Michelangelo and Degas, they all use tracing in many of their works, and it's just a way of capturing an image and moving it somewhere else or just slightly adjusting it so it's exactly how you want. So about a year ago, obviously you all know that your schooling has been affected by the pandemic, but doctoring was as well, and everybody in the hospital, from nurses, porters, surgeons, the administration team, everybody had to do something a little bit different to what was normal. And while we were all doing this, I decided to cheer everybody up and paint some portraits. So I went into the cubicle while they were like putting a plaster on a leg or sewing a finger up, doing an operation, watching the porters push people with wheelchairs around the corridors, and I said, I'm going to take a quick photo of you and I'm going to use that to paint a portrait. So it's like an action shot, and you can do that with your friends too. You don't want them looking directly at the camera because I always think it's quite a nice picture to do something while people are in motion. And what I did with the photos then, I brought them all home, I decided which one was the best one, and then I used tracing to make my image, and then I painted it up like this. I've now done over 55 portraits, and 30 of them are on display at the Norfolk and Norwich Hospital. They've been to other art shows as well, and I've posted them on a virtual online gallery which you'll be able to look at, and I'll put the link at the end so you can see all of my friends who've all been working just as hard as you have during the pandemic. I'm going to now show you a little way in which you can take one of your own photographs. Now, if you've got a phone, that can work quite well, but if you've only got a photograph or a picture out of a magazine, you can also use that to create a lovely piece of your very own art. So let's start off showing you how to draw a basic Mr. Greedy. Now, I use soft B pencils. The higher the number, the softer it is. I draw around the shape, and then I flip the paper over, and then using the back of my nail I scratch over the top so it transfers the image onto your new piece of paper, and then I just darken it up a little bit with a pencil again. The next thing I do is get my colours. I'm using watercolour pencils, but you can use any kind of coloured pencil, wax crayon or felt tip pen, just whatever you prefer. And I'm going to show you how we can use the same way to do these cute pictures of my friend Chris. With the photo I've picked on my phone, I lay the tracing paper over the top and I use my B pencil to draw around the shapes that I can see, especially paying attention to where the shadows are on his clothes. I flip the image over and I draw around all of the shapes, and then I'm going to flip it back over onto my final piece of art paper. There we go. I use the back of my fingernail again. I scratch all over the top, and that's how I transfer my image onto my piece of best paper. Sometimes I just flip it up to check I've got it all there. Then I get my coloured pencils, and again these are watercolour pencils, but you can use anything you like, just darkening up the shadows. And then I always like to use a really wacky colour to brighten up the background of these paintings. It just helps it to pop. The wall in this room was actually just a funny off-white colour, and I just used the photograph on the phone as a reference to where I want the colours to be. There's the mask, and then I also don't forget to draw the patient's little hand and colour up the mat on the trolley. Nice colour. Then I use my watercolour brush. It's any brush, it's just plain water, and it helps mix the watercolour pencil and turns it into paint, which is a really fun technique. I always like to use an ink pen just to draw around the top. You could use a biro. It just sometimes makes a nice, really sharp detail on the paintings. The next type of picture is one where I use a collage of coloured paper. So I use the reverse image of the picture, I transfer it onto the back of coloured paper, and I just cut out the shapes of where his clothes are. Don't worry about the skin or his face, that's a little piece of mask I'm cutting out. And then on my piece of art paper that I'm going to use, I transfer the image again, and then I just glue the piece of coloured paper on there, and there's his clothes, like an instant paper doll. Then using my colour pencils again, I just colour in the skin parts and the little hand on the trolley. I always have the phone ready at the side just so I can see what I'm doing. I then transfer the image back onto the coloured paper, and then I get my pen and I draw in all the details that I'd like to have there. You can just copy the photograph just to see where you want the extra shadows and the detail. Using a nice little orange, I sort of mix a brown and orange and a yellow to get that lovely skin colour. And a pale blue. And then I use my great yellow colour in the back. Now, I didn't know I was going to paint as many people as I have in the last year, but sometimes, you know, fun projects, you just really enjoy them and they grow to something absolutely enormous. And after a while, I started getting contacted by people, and I was featured on the BBC News website and the Dis Express and the Eastern Daily Press, and Radio Norfolk interviewed me as well. So it's all been a bit of a whirlwind in the last year, and I know that I can show you how to draw something really fun. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. Is that sometimes photos on your phone can just move around a bit and it can make it quite tricky, so this is something else that I'd also do. I pop a photograph against a window, this is how I used to do it, and I just trace around my shape like this. Makes it a lot easier. Just want a really nice sharp pencil, and then that way you can also trace your picture that you want to use to make your portrait. So this is Dawn and Dr. Aisha, Dr. Dominic, Hannah Rose, Dr. Bethany, and Lynn.